Good afternoon. This is Delta Wordweavers on October 8th, 2023. And today we have a topic of double, toil and trouble. So we have two storytellers who are going to address their stories to that topic. After that, we'll have a few other topics and enjoy our time together. So thank you for coming to October Delta Wordweavers. We're just going to go ahead and start with our stories. Our first storyteller, introducer, is Sharon Elwell. She's a part of Do Tell Story Swap. And because she used to live, right? Is this right, in Sharon, in Santa Rosa area? But now she lives up in Washington. And I would like to live up there because I know that she takes time in the quiet to listen, observe nature. That would be so wonderful. And some of her stories are about that. But today she has another story to tell us, and we're going to open it up to Sharon Elwell.
Years ago. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Many years ago in Guerrero, there lived a young man named Bernardo. And Bernardo had inherited dinero and una casita, but he didn't want to get married because women, las mujeres, hablan, y gastan dinero. But the problem was that Bernardo couldn't cook. And one day his neighbor Elena said to him, Bernardo, why don't you just hire a cook? What a great idea. So he made a little sign and he took it down to the mercado and he nailed it up. And the sign said, cuarto gratis por mujer que conoce coser. And then he went home and waited to see what would happen. Well, the very next day, he heard a knock at the door. And there was a young woman, and she said, soy viudita que sepa coser. Y quiero una ventana de que puedo ver. So Bernardo invited her in, and he showed her the kitchen. And she said, bien, bien. And then he took her to the little room that had that window she wanted, and she said, bien, bien. So he said, let's try this for a month and see if it works. And she said, bien, bien. So he gave her some money to go to the mercado to buy food and waited to see what would happen. Before evening, wonderful smells started coming out of that kitchen. Bernardo could smell cebolla and ajo and pollo. And when she brought him a big plate of arroz con pollo, he ate so much that he could hardly stand up afterward, and he had to go straight to bed to sleep. And when he woke up, he thought, oh, that was the best meal I ever had in my life. Well, the next day, or that day when he woke up, he smelled roasting chile. When she brought him a dinner of chiles rellenos, he did the same thing. He ate, and he was so full and sleepy that he went straight to bed. Well, they went on this way. By Sunday, she made several dishes, and she even made arroz con leche, rice pudding, and Bernardo was starting to think that marriage wasn't such a silly idea after all. And so he said to her, Cookie, ¿por qué no nos casamos? And she said, bien, bien. So they went down to the courthouse and got married. Well, a few days later, when Cookie was at the mercado, Elena, the neighbor, came over and she said, Bernardo, how well do you know this woman? And he said, well, I know she's the greatest cook in all Guerrero. And she said, do you even know her name? Well, I just call her Cookie because she's a terrific cook. And Elena said, do you know that she flies out the window every night? Now Bernardo was really worried. So the next day he he smelled wonderful smells coming out of the kitchen once again, but he was afraid to eat. So when she served him chili verde, his favorite, he didn't eat any. He waited until she turned her back and left the room, and then he scraped it off into a plant. And he watched that plant go. So he was frightened, and he got into bed and pretended to sleep and waited to see what would happen. And when it was deep, dark night, she came in and stood in the corner and started to spin. And as she spun around and around, she said, piel, adios, piel, adios, piel, adios. And her skin began to disappear. And there she was, una esqueleta con alas, like a bat. And she went to the window, jumped up on the window, and flew away into the night. Well, Bernardo got up and he nailed that window shut. And then he went to the door and he nailed the door shut. And then he stuffed a pillow up the chimney and waited to see what would happen. It was almost morning before he heard her coming back. She was at the window when he heard, and then she was at the door. And then she was on the roof. But the sun started to come up and she couldn't stay out there because sun will make skeletons dissolve into dust, which is what all decent skeletons should do. So she flew away and she was never heard from again around there. But after a little while, Bernardo looked at Elena and he thought, I know her name. I know her parents. And I know she's human. And she's not such a bad cook. So he married her and they lived quietly ever after. But if you ever find yourself in Guerrero and you happen on a village where all the windows are nailed shut, don't spend the night there. Just keep on traveling.
Well told, Sharon. Good story.
Thank you.
Miriam, you're muted.
Thank you, Sharon. I'll start over. Thank you, Sharon, so much. A great opening to our double toil and trouble, because that was in that story. Don't go to that village or the house that's nailed shut. Oh my goodness. Thank you. This topic. Okay, yeah, let's talk to Mindy and you'll need to unmute.
Hi, Mindy.
That was so
Mute.
lovely, Sharon, and I could only pop in for a minute, and I see some old friends here like Ed. That was a wonderful story and put me in the mood. I'm just at crosshairs today. So
Thank you, Mindy.
I'm going to wish everyone a lovely day. And hello, Ed, and it's good to see you. Okay, thanks, Mary. Yeah, and
Thank you.
that was a goodbye. Okay, thank you. I think you got to leave.
We'll talk later on announcements,
Mindy.
but
Thank you for coming.
Mindy will be at Celebration with me. We are the two. She came to introduce herself. You will see her. We're with San Diego. I'll announce it later, but she's our co-host for San Diego with Celebration in November. So she checked in for a couple of reasons. I asked her to. Thank you to Mindy. I want to thank Michelle for bringing up this topic. And so, of course, you, as we read Macbeth, remember that part about the witches, or they're starting to say that the amount of trouble will now be brought on Macbeth, so he better watch out. I'm trying to get myself on spotlight. This is why when Celebration comes, I'm going to have 3 tech people. trying to do it all. It's too much.
Good for you, Marion.
I got it for Celebration, but not today. Okay, so anyway, yeah, Macbeth, he's going to have to watch out because he's in big trouble because he killed everybody on his way to this crown, and the witches, they know it. So they made this chant up, and the chant lets the readers of Macbeth and today us in on that information. They even made a song of the witches. Double, double, toil and trouble. Fire burning cauldron bubble. Fillet of a finny snake. In the cauldron boil and bake. Eye of the newt. Toe of the frog. Wool of a bat and tongue of a dog. Adder's fork and blind worm's sting. Lizard's leg and howlet's wings. For a charm of powerful trouble. Like a hell broth boil and bubble. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble, but with a baboon's blood. Then the charm is firm and good. Whoa, troubles are brewing. So now we have Michelle to share something kind of spooky with us, and we're turning it over to Michelle. Give me a moment to spotlight and take yourself on mute.
Okay, this is something that I did before, so if you've already heard this, please bear with me. Gather round and I'll elucidate what goes on outside when it gets late. Along about midnight, the ghosts and banshees, they get together for their nightly jamboree. There's things with horns and saucer eyes, some with fangs about this size. Some are fat, some are thin, and some don't even wear their skin. I'm telling you, it's a frightful sight to see what goes on Halloween night. When the spooks have their midnight jamboree, they break it up with fiendish glee. Ghosts are bad, but the one that is cursed is the headless horseman. He's the worst. That's right, he's a fright on Halloween night. When he goes a-jogging across the land, holding his noggin in his hand, demons take one look and groan and hit the road for parts unknown. Beware, take care, he rides alone. For there's no spook like a spook that's spurned. They don't like him, and he's really burned. He swears to the longest day he's dead, he'll show them that he can get ahead. They say he's tired of his flaming top. He's got a yen, to make a swap. So he rides one night each year to find a head in the hollowed rear. He likes 'em little, he likes 'em big, parted in the middle, or a wig. Black, white, or even red, the headless horseman needs a head. With a hip, hip, and a clippity-clop, he's out looking for a top to chop. So don't stop to figure out a plan. You can't reason with a headless man. Now, if you doubt this tale is so, I met that spook just a year ago. Now, I didn't stop for a second look, but made for the bridge that spans the brook. For once you cross that bridge, my friend, the ghost is through, his power ends. So when you're riding home tonight, make for the bridge with all your might. He'll be down in the hollow there. He needs your head. Look out! Beware! With a hip, hip, and a clippity-clop, he's out looking for a head to swap. So don't try to figure out a plan. You can't reason with a headless man.
Thank you, thank you. That was wonderful. The gestures and the voicing, and you were having fun. We all storytellers. Yeah, Mark has his thumb up there. That's what brings it across to us, the listener, on this little box. Your enthusiasm and your passion. Thank you so much, Michelle. Great fun. Knightson is a tiny hamlet close to us in Antioch. They recreated the Headless Horseman event. They got a horse, they got a headless horseman to come, and they filmed it on video. If somebody's interested on that, I know who's got the link. And it's a 10-minute, but it was filmed right here locally. It took them a lot of work. They got a bar. The bar out there agreed to have the horse right into the bar and do a presentation. So you can email Marion at Delta Wordweavers if you're interested in that video, and I'll find the link for it. So thank you so much. That was fun. Okay, and Michelle, did you have a second entry today? Oh, you went,
I have another story if I have the time.
Okay, you have the time right now. We're ready.
Our story begins on a dark trail in a dark forest. Two young boys, Timmy and Tommy, were out hiking on this trail. They were on a camping trip with their parents. And the thing about Timmy and Tommy is, although they were brothers, they didn't always get along very well. And seeing it was starting to get dark, they needed to head back to the camp. They discovered they had a problem. They had no way of where to go. They realized they were lost in an unfamiliar trail in the forest. Before they knew it, they came to a fork in the road. "Let's go this way," says Timmy. "That's where our campsite is." "No, it's this way," said Tommy. And before one knew it, both brothers were arguing over who was right and which path was the one to take. But suddenly, their argument was brought to a halt when they became aware of a mysterious sound. After a minute, they realized it was the sound of leaves and branches snapping and cracking. "What is that?" asked Tommy. A mouse?" wondered Timmy. "A mouse? Mice don't make that kind of noise," said Tommy. And before them down the trail, a figure came into view. It was a tall man, and he was holding up his hands like this. "Bloody fingers," he said. And the brothers, they were freaking out because they were in a dark trail in a dark forest with this man who they had no idea who he was or why he was there. So they skedaddled as fast as they could move their feet to get away. And when they dared to look behind, they saw the man was following them. "Bloody fingers!" he shouted. And the brothers saw indeed his fingers were indeed very bloody. They, "Hurry, hurry!" shouts Tom. I'm running, says Timmy. And after what felt like an eternity, Timmy spots something down the trail. "There's the lights of our campsite," he shouts. And this gives them the spur they need to really make their legs move faster than they ever had before. And they open the door into their camper trailer and hid underneath the bed. "What are you guys doing?" asks their little sister. But before they could answer, there's a knock on the door. She gets up from a book she was reading, opens the door, and there's the man. "Bloody fingers!" he shouts. She goes to a cabinet and asks, "Need a Band-Aid?"
Like surprise endings. That's a surprise ending, and it's fun. Thank
Love
you
that ending.
again.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And again, you've learned to embody yourself and give expression to the scene. So it put me right there. Great, great presentation. Thank you. Our next teller is Ed Lewis. We're leaving, well, I don't know if we're leaving the topics of double, toil and trouble, because since his topic is my life in crime, sounds like we might have some trouble and double toil. We don't know. This is a new story for Ed, and Delta Wordweavers is the place to bring your story to practice it. You don't have to have these totally, this is the place, just in short. You can practice here and bring it to us for that. So he's working out the bugs on this story, and we're anxious to hear My Life in Crime. Ed, take it away. Let me get you on first. Let me get.
All right, we're ready. Okay. So thanks for the opportunity to practice a new story I just finished writing this morning. I began my life of crime at the tender age of 10 years. Now my parents labeled it as thievery, but as you're going to hear in this story, it had nothing to do with thievery. It was all about peer pressure and a desire to save the earth, save the planet. My first experience with thievery was actually an act of bravery and definitely pride. We had a gang of 10 and 11-year-old boys that always hung out, and we were always trying to one-up each other. And one day, our leader, Big Al, said, "Here's the challenge, boys. We're going to see who can egg the most cars with direct hits of eggs. And whoever gets the most hits gets the coveted Playboy magazine to take home for a week." Great. We were all excited about that. But I got to thinking, how am I going to get these eggs? you needed at least a dozen. And so I checked the refrigerator and there were eggs in there, but I went, there is no way I can get a dozen eggs out of there without my mother knowing about it. So I decided to be Robin Hood. I went up to the rich local store at Proctor Street. This is in Tacoma, Washington, not too far from where Sharon's living now. And I had it all planned out. I was going to steal a carton of eggs, at least a 12 pack. And I had on it was wintertime, so I had a big overcoat on. I had a nice pocket inside. Okay, this is going to be perfect. And they knew me there because, and all us boys, because we would come up there to the aisle where the Topps baseball cards were. And we would, whenever we had money, we would buy those cards. On a little side note, at the age of 23, when I was a little bit destitute, I sold my 1958 to 1960 Topps baseball cards for $3,000. It was nice that my mother saved those for me. Well, I went in and, said, hi, how you doing? And I walked over, because I would get groceries too. I walked over and got a carton of eggs, and I brought them back and I put them on the shelf right next to the top cards and started looking around and just went, oh my gosh, I want to time this. Excuse me. I'm going to do a start. And then I tried to take that carton of eggs and shove it down into my jacket, but it wouldn't fit. I mean, I checked the aisle. I was clear, but I couldn't get them in there. What in the heck am I going to do? So I went back to looking at cards, so it wasn't too obvious. Someone had walked down the aisle. And then when it was clear again, I went, okay, well, I'm just going to take them off. I had big pockets. I took out the 12 eggs. I put them in my pockets. And then I got a package of Topps, and I went up to the counter and I said, thank you, please, this is going to be a good one. I know I'm going to get Willie Mays in this. And I paid my money, and then I headed out. And when I was walking through the door, I accidentally bumped into the side of the door, and I heard crack, crack, crack. Oh my God. But it wasn't too loud. No one heard me. So I kept on going and got down around the block, and then I checked out, and I had 5 broken eggs in my coat pocket. Well, I cleaned it out. I knew I couldn't win now because this was a challenge that day. I took those eggs, I threw them at cars, and but when I got home, my mother wanted to wash my coat. Now I had cleaned it out, so okay, it was very filthy. Gave it to her, and she came to me and said, what is inside your pocket there? This is a sticky mess. And I wasn't quite the tall tale teller that I am today. So I fessed up and was busted. Well, my father said, well, son, tomorrow you are going to call the store manager. You're going to apologize, and you're going to ask for punishment. Oh my God, this is a Sunday. I know I can't do that. But anyway, I had to do it. So I called him up, and I'm sure my father had got a hold of him, and they worked something out. He said, come on up next Sunday after church, wear your nicest clothes, and you're going to wash all the windows out in front, and you're going to sweep the sidewalks. It took me about an hour and a half to do that. And of course, all my buddies are walking by because the baseball field where we practice was right across the street. And they're all hooting and hollering and giving me a hard time. My pride was hurt. And, you would think that that might have ended my life of crime, but I only got better at it. And I was really upset that I didn't get a chance to look at that Playboy magazine. So I went in with my buddy and to Rexall Drugs. And while he was getting some top baseball cards, I went and I got a Playboy magazine and I stuffed it down into my pants. And then we walked out. So I had the magazine. Fantastic. All the boys wanted to see it, of course. And my dad and I had built this clubhouse that I could have company over and it could sleep one other boy. And we would do that during the summer every week that someone would come over. Unbeknownst to them, we would slip out about 1 o'clock in the morning and just go cruising down to the gulch and around to houses and pretend that we were criminals. And I got the bright idea to take pictures out of the Playboy magazine and put them on the windshield of cars. So we did that about 4 different times. And then the word got around our community and people were wondering who in the heck was this? But we never got caught. It was an act of pride. My status in the gang of 10, 11-year-old boys went way up. Well, you know, I was pretty good. You know, I was getting a little smarter, and I really wasn't a thief. In junior high school, I did steal some records from a store one time. You know, and I never got caught. So that was the greatest thing. I once in a while I'd take some candy, but I was just stealing from the rich, kind of like Robin Hood, giving it to my buddies. And you know, but now as an upstanding adult citizen, I've mostly given up on my thieving ways. But some of you may think that what I'm about to tell you might seem like thievery, but of course, it's really an act of kindness and environmental concern. My stepmother, Katerina, was raised on a small farm in Germany with 9 other siblings. They were very poor. She came to the States, and after my mom passed, my dad and her were together the last 12 years of my father's life. And I would go visit them. They lived in Santa Rosa. I'd visit them every weekend, and I would take them out for drives throughout the beautiful countryside. And one gripe that Katerina had were all of the fruit that she would see in a front yard that might fall off of the trees and no one was taking it. Or the orchards, the same thing, with the Gravenstein apples. She would just rant and rave about that. So I said, you know what? Let's just go take them. No one needs them. You know, they're not using it, apparently. It'd be an act of kindness to the environment. So we began our thieving together. My dad, Katerina, and myself, wherever we would see in the front yards, apples on the ground, we'd go pick them up. We would go to orchards, pick them up. It was slick, and she would make the best applesauce. It was fantastic. Now, you know, some of you again may think of that as thievery, but really, you know, it even evolved to the point where we would go knocking on the door and get permission. So this went on for about 10 years, and we got a lot of apples, and you know, and you can tell it's really not thievery. So, you know, and I realized that after hearing me share this story, you're thinking that you've heard one of the world's greatest storytellers, and you would probably like me to come to your home and perform a house concert. But you know, I want to make sure that you realize that my thieving days are over. And anyway, they were justified. And, you know, I was taken from the rich, given to the poor. So if you have any hesitancy, please be reassured that your treasures are safe. I haven't bothered from the rich for over 10 years. Now, you aren't rich, are you? Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Well, yeah, I think that was double. He did the toiling, but got into trouble. I hear
That's
a
right.
little yeah, a bit of rationalization for our actions when the parents don't understand. They do not understand it, boy. Well, I didn't get caught. I'm just a Robin Hood. Yes, yes. And he's gleaning. Hey, they're gleaning. Hey, that's in the Bible.
That's right.
You're gleaning.
Right.
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 Some wonderful times and telling good stories. That's the stories.
So that was
Yeah.
under 10 minutes, right? Or right around 10 minutes? Because I've got 8 minutes on mine and I didn't start it at the beginning. Can you tell or?
Let's see, just a minute. 2 minutes. I'll tell you later when I have it
Okay,
here.
that's fine. Yeah, thank you.
2:46. Okay. Yeah, with that at the end there. All right. So thank you to Ed. I'm learning to do this. Mr. Mark Berry. Okay. Heads up to Mark. I'm
I'm here.
getting,
I'm here. I just thought of my turn. I just thought of a topic. I have a little story on the topic, and then if you have time and you want the other story that I had prepared, we could do that later. So my niece was babysitting for the neighbors, which she had done a time or two, and this time she was there with the two little children, and mom and dad went out, and dad called the house to see how things were going, and my niece said, well, unfortunately, I can't get the TV in the living room to work. I can't watch my program. And he said, well, that's okay. You can just go upstairs and this time, you can just watch the TV up in the master bedroom. So she did. She went upstairs and watched that TV, and that TV worked just fine. And he called another hour later to check in, see how things were going. And she said, I'm not comfortable here. It feels really strange. I don't know what to do. And he said, well, what seems to be the problem? And she said, I'm just kind of spooked out because of that life-size clown costume you have over there in the corner of the master bedroom. And he said, well, in that case, why don't you pack up the kids and just walk next door to Mrs. Wilson's house and call me after you get there. Will you do that? She said, sure, I can do that. So she packed up the kids and walked next door to Mrs. Wilson's house and then called him back on the phone. And she said, why'd you have me go through all that anyway? And he said, because we don't have any clown statues in our house. You want the story? You want the story I prepared or later? Now? Okay. This is Poe. This is a story starring Poe. Poe was a servant to a very wealthy Chinese man who married a very wealthy Chinese woman. You see, back then, their families would arrange the marriages, and there was the richest family over in this province and the richest family in the neighboring province, and they thought the only possible proper match for their children would be if they matched their children to each other, so they did. This couple, now married, are the richest people anybody ever heard of for miles around. They live on a beautiful house it's more like a palace, really, on grounds that are also palatial, walled grounds on top of a little hill overlooking the village. And the village consists of poor rice farmers, just like all of the villages in every direction from there consist of poor rice farmers. Well, the gentleman and the lady had a fine life. They had servants growing the finest food in their garden. They had servants going far and near to hunt or catch the best food for their palates, and they had the best chef. They had the very finest of everything. But they couldn't go anywhere because back then, if you went somewhere, you would come back and your possessions would be gone. Their fine things was just too much temptation even for the most loyal servants. So they got kind of tired of nothing to do. And of course, this was way back when, long before TV or radio or anything like that. So the master of the house called in Po. Now, Po had been his loyal servant for over 20 years and more like a trusted friend, really. And Po was listening to the master, and the master said, Po, I have this sack of gold pieces, and I want you to do a very special errand for us, Po. I want you to go as far as you need to go, wherever you need to go, to look up a master storyteller. And I want you to purchase a story from this master storyteller and bring it back to us. And then we can tell each other the story on these long, dark winter nights. And that's what we'd like to do. And Poe, well, he didn't know anything about storytellers or stories, but he was a very loyal servant of his friend and master. So he took the bag of gold pieces and went along his way, thinking he'll figure out something. And as Poe decided which way to go, he just went down to the nearest road, and he headed over there in the direction of the nearest town a ways away. And as he was walking along past the rice fields, and there was one poor rice farmer there observing his fields as they were being watered, and they passed pleasantries, good day, good day. And the poor rice farmer said to Poe, what errand are you on today? And Poe said, well, it's quite an errand, and I'm not sure how to do it, but my master sent me to find a master storyteller and purchase a master story. And I have this bag of gold pieces with which to do so. Well, the poor rice farmer, just like Poe, he didn't know anything about stories, and he didn't know anything about storytellers, but he did know something about a bag of gold. And so the rice farmer said, oh, you are in luck. I just happen to be a master storyteller. I'm just watching these fields for a friend of mine, and I have just such a story that you can take back to your master. Well, imagine Poe. What good fortune! The very first person I talk to just happens to be a master storyteller and has a story just like the one my master sent me to bring home. Oh, Poe was so excited and so happy, he sat down on the ground to hear the story. And the rice farmer was trying to think of something to say. A few minutes later, this white egret, they had egrets, they're kind of like storks on long, spindly legs, and they would wade in the rice paddies looking for little tiny minnows and things to eat. Well, as they were sitting there and the rice farmer was trying to think of something to say, a nice, beautiful big egret came flying in on its big wings and landed right in his rice paddy, where he stood in the water on his long legs. And the rice farmer said to Poe, look, there he comes. And Poe was very thoughtful and said it over to himself many times, trying to remember the story. Look, there he comes. Look, there he comes. And then the egret took a few steps in their direction. And of course, the rice farmer said, now he comes closer, step by step. And so Poe was remembering, now he comes closer, step by step. And then the egret stopped and looked down at the water as if he was looking for a minnow or something to eat. And so the rice farmer said, now he stops, he looks, he listens. So Poe was remembering it. And then the egret turned and walked a few splashy steps and took wing and flew away. And so the rice farmer said, there, he turns, he flies away, never to return. And Poe was remembering, there he turns, he flies away, never to return. After a period of silence, Poe said, is that all? And the rice farmer said, what more could there be? So Poe didn't expect to understand the story really. He didn't know anything about such things, but he had it memorized, and so he gave the poor rice farmer the bag of gold pieces and went back on his journey back home. And when he got home, and there was Mr. and Mrs. Wealthy people living in a home that was more like a palace, really, in these beautiful grounds. And when Poe got there, they were so excited to see him and so soon. And he said, I've got it. I've got the story. And so they sat down real quick to listen, to learn the story. And Poe repeated the story, and it was only those 4 lines. And so he was able to repeat it several times. And well, the husband and the wife didn't think they understood the story, but they weren't intellectuals. They weren't sure that they expected to understand the story. Maybe by telling and listening over time, maybe they would understand it better. On a special night, I think it was their anniversary or something like that, it was his turn. It was the husband's turn to tell the story to his wife that evening. And so he laid out beautiful candles to light the room just so. And he's moved the finest chair and put the finest silk pillow in front for her feet. And he made all of this beautiful area for his wife to listen. And then he put on his favorite silk robes and his favorite silk hat to perform the story for his wife that evening. Well, in the meantime, as they were preparing this, down at the bottom of the hill in the village, there were folks in there at the tavern, and they were drinking rice wine. And there were 3 fellows that, well, they weren't thought to be the fellows of the best character of all the fellows in that area. As a matter of fact, people thought that if they saw something unattended, they might just help themselves and try and make off with anything that was loose. And those kind of fellows, well, they were drinking their rice wine, and one of them started to get up a lot of rice wine courage, and he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go up to that house on the hill that's more like a palace, really, and I'm going to see if I can't just relieve them of some of their treasures. And the others said, oh, you'll be killed. There's no way anybody could get away with that. And after a little more rice wine, he had a little more rice wine courage, and so the bandit said, yes, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it tonight. And so he walked up the hill, weaving a little bit, and when he got up to the walls of the home that was more like a palace, really, he managed to find a vine, and he managed to climb the tall garden wall. And as soon as he came down on the inside of the garden wall, in the garden of this beautiful home, he heard this big voice that sounded like it came from everywhere. And the voice said, look, here he comes. The bandit thought this place must be witched. This place must be haunted or something. I don't see anybody. I don't hear anybody near me. And yet this voice describes my every move. Just at that time, he heard the big voice say, now he stops, he looks, he listens. Oh my gosh. The bandit was so scared, so frightened. He didn't know what was going on. But his rice wine courage and his greed overcame his fear, and so he walked closer to the house. At that time, he heard the big voice say, here he approaches, closer and closer, step by step. Well, that was enough for the bandit. The bandit had heard enough. His fear took over, and he turned on his heels and he ran. And just in time, he just barely heard the last words of the story. As he was climbing over the wall, he heard the big voice say, there, he turns, he flies, he runs away, never to return. That was the last time, till this day, that was the last time that any robbers or bandits or thieves even thought about approaching the beautiful house on the hill that was more like a palace, really, once they'd all heard that story. And the moral of the story and the point of the story is just to show you that there is great value in a good story, well told.
You, Mark. Everybody can unmute and share responses
Thanks
to
for
Mark.
listening.
And the other tellers. The recording actually went to low bandwidth for you. We heard the voice was straight through, very nice, but the video would was weak at times. But
Oh, I'm
let
glad
me
you
say,
heard the words.
we did. But let me say thank you to the video listeners. So come again to Delta Wordweavers, and next month is Celebration. So look it up on Storytelling Association of California, and we'll see all the video listeners then. See you then.